Hello. In this section, I want to dive into divs or dividers. Dividers show nothing visually in your preview or on a web page. All they do is provide a logical grouping or divider of the HTML document. They can be grouped in such a way that you can manage how they look and feel using CSS. What I've done, and I do not expect you to do currently, is copy anything you see on the screen. In fact, I just want you to sit there with your hand off the mouse and keyboard and just watch what I'm doing. So right now we have two H2 elements here. In my mind, it makes a lot of sense to have these grouped together. So what I'm going to do is create a div. I'm going to give it a class. And the way you give it a class with shorthand in the auto expander is do div dot and then the class name. Now you can name it whatever you want, but try to stay logical. So we're just going to call this headers. All right. And then I'm going to tab, and you can see that it's already created the class headers. Everything that we create in divs should have a class associated with it. Now you don't need to know what headers class does, just assume that that class already exists in CSS. We haven't talked about CSS yet. I don't want you to know anything about CSS. You're not there yet. You need to learn how to manipulate this page a little bit further. Well, since we have divs to help break up our page, maybe we can use divs to also move things around on our page. Let's look at our Bootstrap guide and find out how to do this. So on getbootstrap.com, if we go to layout, we'll see a couple subcategories to discuss. The first is breakpoints. And so what you need to know about breakpoints is that when a page is expanded or made really small or opened on a mobile browser versus an iPad, for example, the page needs to have different breakpoints for where the elements switch from being a single column to multiple columns or back and forth. And this is called responsive web design. We really want to leverage that because not every screen is the same size. Okay, so on this documentation, it shows that there are multiple breakpoints. There's none where you don't put a class for it. The small, medium, large, extra large, and extra, extra large. And this specifies the dimensions for the pixels, and that's a horizontal pixel size. All right. The next concept to really take in is containers. And the way containers work is that you can put either container, container fluid, or container breakpoint, which a container breakpoint would be like small, medium, large, extra, extra large. So container fluid will fill up 100%. And what I mean by 100%, I mean 100% from start to end. And when I'm referring to start and end right now, I'm referring to horizontally start to end. Okay, so let's affix container fluid and then container to two separate divs to see what it looks like. So let's create a div to group our ordered list and our unordered list. Let's do that. We're going to put inside of it these, an option up. And let's move this back up too. All right, so now this is in there, I'm going to give it a class equals container fluid. Now you can see what it's doing is it's trying to fill that entire container. When I use just container, the container is smaller, has padding. If I do this, it's a little bit larger, fills the entire page. Now the reason why there's space on the right and the left is because Bootstrap comes with padding, safety margins inside of all of your containers. And so you don't have to do any of that stuff. It's already there. All right. So let's compare this with just container. Let's put container up here. Container. So note that you can use two classes and they're separated by a space. And so now this container is much smaller than this one. And this one fills the entire 100% of the allowable space. This container only fills max allowed width. Slightly, subtly different. Okay, so after we understand containers, then we need to understand our grid. Our grid is a challenging subject, and I created this Excel spreadsheet to kind of try to explain it a little bit better. And just go with it. You don't have to do anything here. Just press the I believe button. So Bootstrap Grid provides 12 columns by default, and these columns can be broken up however you like. So if you use just col or column, it will fill the entire provided space of the container. So the container would contain each one of these, and the col would be the column inside of it. Imagine that this, from this corner down to here, is the viewable page, viewable web page. Now we can make containers appear differently by adding col4, where it fills 4 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, or we could do col8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Additionally, you could do col8 on one side and just col on the other, and it'll automatically expand because it's intelligent enough to know that this should fill the entire space provided. Col6 will fill half of the page, and these each change based on the page size. So if the page gets smaller, those columns aren't actually going to be the same. This whole same space would be divided by 12. I don't want to read all these off, but I will take a screenshot and add it to the notes of this section. That way you have it to refer to when you're trying to understand this grid pattern that we'll be leveraging. Now, we can come in here into the docs under the grid, and we can copy some of these just to see what they'd actually look like. So let's do that now. I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm going to put what we just saw in the example. And you can see these each have col for column, and they live inside of a row. So I can create a second row, Option Shift down, and oh wait, that didn't work the way I expected it to. And this is because this row didn't close out. So let's copy the entire row div. Let's go down one, and then we can do it again. We can continue to add rows just like this. So I'm going to delete this, and I'd like to show you some more really cool things that you can do with these pre-built classes, this library of classes. You can set columns to look differently. And this explains here, if this is 12 wide, and I make the first one col and the second one col6, which is half of the space provided, and the third one col, this will make up half of the page, and these two will make up their individual quarter of the page. In the second row, we can see it's col5, so it's slightly smaller than col6, and these automatically fill the space provided. You're probably wondering, like, why does this matter? And this matters because we can start positioning things on our page where we want them. So let's do div.box and create a box. Now, this created a box because I already created a class called box. This box doesn't exist in Bootstrap. I'm making it for demonstration purposes. All right, let's make a couple boxes. Now, if I want these boxes to be side by side, now I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to call it container, and I'm going to tab. And inside of that, I'm going to put a div.row and tab. And inside of that row, I'm going to put all these divs with a box. I'll move that up. Okay. So what you can see is I have one row in my HTML, but here there's 3. Well, why is that? Well, our page isn't large enough to display all 12 side by side. And as the page gets larger, you can see that now it's only 2 rows. And if I close the sidebar and I full screen this, it'll be 12 wide. Well, it should be, but the point is that there are 12 boxes and they should all fit side by side. So let's fix that. And you'll have a sneak peek preview into CSS. All I'm going to do is remove this and comment it out. So in CSS, you can comment using the same method, command/, and I'm going to save. I'm going to go back to my preview. Now all the boxes are kind of broken, and this is okay. I'm going to go back to my divs.html, and I'm going to add an H1 in all of them. H1 tab, I'm going to say box. And inside of that box, I'm going to give another class, and I'm going to say col. All right. So now I've affixed this col class, and I'm going to delete box. So now let's preview it. And we'll see that there are 2 rows. Each one has 6. Now if I close my sidebar and I close these pages, it has 12 wide. I'm going to go back over to my document, and I'm going to say I want a second row. So I'm going to copy the entire row class div down one, and I'm only going to use 3 of these. So I'm going to delete most of them. So I want to make the middle one large. I want to make it half the screen. So I'm going to make it col 6. So I go back to the preview, and you can see it takes up half of the page on a large screen. And as the screen gets smaller, by adding my documents back in here and split screening it, it's much smaller. And the top one was responsively added to be still readable, and it will continue to do that on every breaking point. Go to the Bootstrap documentation. It provides a lot of components that we can use. Like I said, this is just a demo, so there's no reason for you to follow along. I'm going to delete all this, and we can come to our Bootstrap documentation, and we can start picking components and add them to our document in order to scaffold out what we would like our web page to look like. So for example, let's go to navbar, and it's got a couple examples of nav bars, and we can copy this first one. We'll just copy the code and put it in here. Now we have a nav bar, and you can still see it's putting the borders. So I'm going to delete my style sheet that I've added. I'm just going to comment it out. And so now you have this responsive sidebar with the hamburger menu when the screen size is small. And as the screen size gets larger, it will expand responsively. And you have drop downs, it's interactive. Now we're going to go open back up our div.html, and we're going to minimize this nav bar. And we're going to select the whole thing and delete it. And then I want to teach you about cards. And then I'm going to give you an assignment related to card. Card is a very simple component. It provides you with an image title, some text underneath, and a button. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to put it down here, and we're going to paste. Now, it's my strong opinion that CSS should never be inline, and I really dislike it. I believe that CSS should be in its own file, just like we have done previously, where we added a link and we reference a CSS file. So I'm deleting that out. And then on the image that's in there, I'm going to provide it an image source. So I'm going to delete the ... I'm going to click on div.html, and then I'm going to click on my image that I created. I'm going to copy relative path, and I'm going to ... / paste. Now my image should appear when I open up my preview, and I have my card. So in the card title, I'm going to put my name, and I'm going to put in here an unordered list. And inside that unordered list, we're going to answer 5 questions. So the first question is going to be, who are you? You already answered that, right? Your name is at the top. My name is Li. What do you do? Li. Who do you do it for? Li. What are you passionate about? How do the people do it for benefit? Now, I want you to fill this out. I want you to actually like go through, create a paragraph, maybe multiple paragraphs, but create a sentence or 3 sentences that answers these questions, that describes who you are and has a picture of yourself, a professional photo. And you can add the link in this button here. This button has the class BTN, which specifies it as a button, and primary. And you can have it go somewhere. So we can click the href and we can say google.com, for example, a website that you find meaningful. And lastly, what I want you to do is change the color of the font to blue and the color of the button. And if you're curious how to do that, you refer back to these documentations here and you go to utilities and you can click colors. Now the colors, this is a crash course here. Colors, if I change the class on any of these, let's say I add a class here and I say text primary, I have to delete the dot in front of it. It turned blue. Now a button, this one's currently primary, but in the documentation, there's a bunch of different ones. And I'm just going to go with warning. You can see that the button is warning, and you can do text light. So I want you to make this a green button, and I want it to have white text or a white background with green text. I look forward to seeing what you've made. You can post it on CodePen. You can make the whole thing in codepen.io if you'd like. Share it with me on Twitter at Coding with Drew K. I will see you in the next section.